Can you all see those? Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you very much. So I'm going to do just a little bit about why engage with BELMAS. I'm going to keep it quite quick, actually, more for the recording than for those people who are joining us in person, for anybody who's watching it online afterwards. But then we'll get through to the publications bit, because we've got a lot of people on screen today who are in sort of year 4, year 5, just submitted thesis. We're more interested in this session in the publications element, which is one of the quite a few things that we do at BELMAS. So we do critically the in-field networking for education leadership. So as part of that, we publish 2 journals. So Megan's going to talk about education management and leadership today. We also publish management in education. I can talk a bit about that at the end if we want to. We run an annual international education leadership conference. So our conference next summer is in Brighton for 2025. And at that conference, we get presentations from all around the world. We've got members at the moment from 79 different countries. So we are a British organisation, but we're very much an international organisation. We've got 13 research interest groups, and I'll talk a little bit about those. But we've done quite a lot of work in the last couple of years on our awards, bursaries and grants. And we have a range of additional member benefits that we wanted to be able to talk about. So particularly for early career researchers, as it's Early Career Researcher Month in October this month, coming and doing this in-field networking is a really important role for postgraduate researchers. So it's part of that becoming of being an early career researcher. So getting a feel for an in-field conference is important. Conferences like ours are much smaller than the bigger conferences like BERA that you might have been to, because we're literally just looking at education leadership. So it's a smaller, more personal conference where lots of time really for that kind of conversations and to meet wider people who end up being your external examiners, and those kind of contacts from people in field. So the people there are people that review your papers that come from your thesis, and people that collaborate with you in projects as early career researchers too. So our research interest groups, what we find is research interest groups kind of ebb and flow depending on who's co-convening them. So SEPL's at the top here has been a really powerful research interest group for us over the years. It's had lots of publications from it, and it's just going through a transition at the moment in its co-conveners. So they're going to hold an event later on this year. Our Emerging Researchers Interest Group, some of you who are doing doctorates on call today might be part of. It's what we used to call our DRIG, our Doctoral Research Interest Group, and that's got a new steering group running it now. They held an event last week, which was very good, which is on the website. So they're really leading that themselves. They're a group of people who are in the process of submitting doctorates and having just been examined on their doctorates. So they're in those early stages of first papers and things from their doctorates. Gender and Education Leadership RIG has been going a very long time, again, a very successful RIG for BELMAS. It's had a slight change in its leadership of RIG conveners recently, but have held an event very recently. So lots there if you're interested in that particular area of field. Governing and Governance, which Stephanie was just saying that she tends to go to. Again, one of our most successful, most active rigs, hold regular events. We've done lots on the blogging front as well. Our Send and Inclusion Leadership rig is just being relaunched. We've got a research interest group meeting on Thursday, and that's got a new group of people coming in to run it. Our International and Comparative Education rig is one of our new ones that's been running for a couple of years now, and again is running very successfully. And then we have Leadership in Early Years Education that's not long held a meeting. So again, good group of people there. Leadership Preparation and Development is one of the ones, is the one that I co-convene. I've been doing that for quite a few years now. So we tend to have quite an international focus for that. We've been through periods where we've had a big national focus for it, but at the moment we're going through a phase where we're having an international focus. And the post-16 education leadership rig is the one I was just mentioning there to Stephanie. And then we have Race and Education Leadership, which has got a new co-convener coming in shortly for it. and the reflective practice rig, which has been quite successful, and structural reform, which we're just having a think about at the moment, because the system in England specifically has been reformed and those reforms are here to stay. So we think that that one might need a new name, but just thinking about who we've got on the call today and various research interests. Eleanor, it's structural reform that has been your area. Yeah, definitely. Okay, so the role of an early career researcher then, this is the bit that people often forget, is so as an early career researcher, you have currency. You have currency for 5 years after you've completed your thesis. So we've got lots of steps in BELMAS that kind of keep you company over that journey. But also critically, most of the big bids, if people are bidding for UKRI funding, are supposed to have an ECR as part of those bids. So you should be talking to your supervisors, talking to people who are putting those bids in, because you are a useful person to those people. So do keep that on your radar. So our kind of progression, if you like, and it does change because different people come to their doctorates. We're an area where lots of mature students do doctorates after careers in teaching and leading. But our progression through things tend to be to present your research at a research interest group meeting, present a poster if you're a little bit nervous about the idea of presenting a paper. So come to a conference, look at the conference, present a poster. There's an award for best poster. Present a PGR paper from your doctorate, and then there's an award for ECR paper. And Karen, I think you won that this year, the ECR paper award. And then you present a paper, and there's an award as well for the best conference paper. And then there's an award for the best thesis award, and then you can submit, depending on how you're dividing your research up, you can submit your research to management in education. That tends to be shorter papers, so 4,000 word papers, rather than EMAL, which tends to be 8,000 word papers. But I'll leave Megan to talk more about that in a moment. And then as you progress through your career, there are awards for those best papers for management in education, education management and leadership as well. So submitting an abstract to conference or submitting a poster to conference, if you're before that stage where you don't want to present at conference, is really important, because you're then getting that membership, which lots of people on the call have done today, and you're getting included in those RIG updates. You can see what research interest groups are happening, when their meetings are. All the attendance to RIGs is then free with your membership. Most of those these days are held online. We are doing one physical meeting of my research interest group, the one that I co-convene next year. But then you can apply to attend conference, and we have awards, bursaries and grants in place for that. So we fully funded a number of places for conference last year, and we funded some conference places, so where we didn't fund the accommodation and the travel, but we funded some as whole packages, and we funded some just for the attendance at conference, where people then had to pay for their own travel and own hotel. And we've put together a package on the BELMAS conference website with lots of different types of places that people can stay at. So that goes from a hostel right through to the hotel where the conference is. So there are awards, bursaries and grants that are available. They are competitive, but they all have different categories that people can apply for them for. So that's the theme for this year's conference, for those of you who are interested in applying for that. And I'll talk a bit more at the end about deadlines for conference. We've got a separate session, so just a quick plug for that, on the 7th of November, where Kelly and I are going through the online submission portal for people who haven't presented at that before. But Eleanor, you were just saying you did that last year. Did you find it fine? It's not too difficult, is it? Yeah, it's quite straightforward, but we are doing a whole session for it, just in case anybody wants us to go through it. Okay, Megan, over to you.
I think you'll have to do the slides for me, Deb, won't you?
That's fine.
Should I kind of cough or something?
Yeah, give me a nod. That's fine.
Okay. Hello, everybody. This is really just an overview, and then I'm happy to take questions, because there are so many things that people need to know. And I suppose the first thing to know is it is a bit of a navigate. through the journal publication process. And it's never as easy as it appears, but it's not as difficult as it appears either. So I'm trying to give you a sort of overview, and then we'll look at some specifics, or you can ask questions, etc. Okay, next one. Thank you. So I think Deb and I will share some of our personal experiences. I'm hoping you will, Deb, anyway. And I'm going to explain a little bit about being the editor, how the work is done, the challenges that you have as an editor, especially in terms of the amount of submissions that you get when you're a Q1 journal, how we make decisions, and then maybe you or us at the end will have a few takeaways you might like to take away with you for future reference. So that's the kind of what I'm hoping to do in the next 10 minutes, really, I think. Thanks, Deb. Okay, so this slide looks really quite simple, and what I'm going to do is just expand on it a bit. So EMAL is a top journal in the field, which is great, but it does mean that we only take for publication roughly, and it varies from year to year, about 12% of all the manuscripts that come our way. It's very low overall. So don't be too disheartened. This is true of a lot of Q1 journals. Don't be disheartened if you don't get through on your first attempt. I would say that you should never be disheartened. Okay. One of my PhD students got his first article into EMAL and he won the best paper prize. So it is possible as a doctoral student to put in something to EMAL and then go on as Dan did to win the best paper prize. And I would recommend looking at Dan Keller's article, which is in the EMAL from a few years ago, if you're interested in to see what he did, because he just picked on one part of his PhD process, which is the literature review, and did an overview on international schools. But I think it's very clever. Oh, no, go back. It's very clever. It's very cleverly done. So I'd say, I can't remember what its title is, but it's Dan Keller, Kellar. So the process. So you submit, and that I think is quite, we'll have a look at the submission portal if we've got time in a minute. You submit, you make sure that you put in the right amount of words. You will get rejected if you try to sneak in over the EMAL limit. The system will just say, no, sorry, we won't have you. We have an editorial assistant called Louise, who is absolutely great, and she makes sure that you'll get a note saying, could you please get rid of 500 words or whatever it is. But it's far better to make sure that you don't overdo it in the first place. And I would say, actually, don't feel you have to work really hard to get it to 8,000. You just need to be able to say something great or meaningful or interesting or useful. And if that's only 7,000 words, that's absolutely fine. I don't sit and think, oh, this one's not very long. That's not one of the criteria, but just so that you know that that's what happens at the very beginning. And Louise will be back in touch with you at various stages of the process if there's any queries about your submission. And she's really, really helpful. I'm the deputy editor and Tony Bush is the editor-in-chief, which sort of means that we do everything together, except that I'm in charge of different parts of the world to him. We sort of divide the world up. So I'm actually in charge of all the papers that come from the US, Canada, South America, Europe, and the UK. So, and then Tony does the preparing for publication, proofreading, and writing the editorial. So, but he's the big cheese, so to speak. But I am in charge of our part of the world, I suppose, is the key thing. So if you put your paper in, put it in, and we do pride ourselves at EMAL that we turn around things as quickly as we possibly can. The first thing that might happen is that you get a desk reject. Now, people get quite upset about this because a desk reject, oh, they don't even want to send it out to review. But actually, my feeling is if the piece that comes in doesn't fit EMAL's, so for example, I had one recently on mentoring special needs teachers in Kentucky, which I'm sure is a very interesting article, but is not to do with EMAL and its plan and its focus and everything. So I desk rejected that one. And it may be desk rejected if it's about leadership as well. Once we looked at, we'll talk about the criteria for rejection as well. But a desk reject is not the end of the world. I do try, if I see the person perhaps is a young researcher, I do try to give some clues as to why it might have been desk rejected. You can write back to an editor of a journal because you'll get their email on it. But I would caution about how you write back to them. Do be polite. I did have a PhD student the other year who said, "How could you reject my article?" That's how she started, which isn't the most warm and welcoming thing to get in your e-box. So do try to treat the editor nicely, and I'm sure they'll be helpful to you if they can. But assuming that you don't get desk rejected, then we do try to send out the articles within a day or two to our referees. Now, this is the part of the process that can take a little bit longer, because first of all, the referee may be too busy to look at it and may say, "I can't do it this time." The referee may decide, yes, they can do it, but it's going to take them a while. And there's all sorts of reasons. So sometimes you will go through the next bit of the process really quickly, and other times it'll be longer because it's got to go out to 2 referees who will each look at it anonymously and send back to me their comments on the piece. And so their choices are they can accept it without any corrections at all. This is a very rare occurrence. They can say, "Please, can you make some minor corrections to this?" And they will suggest what those might be. Or there can be major corrections that they're suggesting. Or they might say, "No, let's reject it altogether." Now, the thing that most upsets people, I think, is getting major, when they're newly into the field of writing for journals, is getting major resubmission. Okay, because that's it kind of goes into our thinking about PhDs. Does this mean a lot of rewriting? Now, most of the referees for email are really helpful and say, "Well, I think this needs a lot of work in this part of the article or in this part of the article." And so I think major can actually be not a problem. It can help you make an even better article than the initial one that you sent in. So don't panic if that happens and you get major. Just sit down, look at the referee's comments and progress from there. Now, there is another little bit in here in that I will have a look at the referee's comments. If one referee says this is the best thing I've ever read and the other one says this is terrible, I usually send it to a third member, usually of the international or the national editorial board, for a sort of third view. So sometimes you might get something back with 3 referees' comments on it, and then I'll put an overarching comment at the top. So that can happen. And once you get it back, then you can resubmit. And we have a time frame, which I honestly can't remember off the top of my head. But when you resubmit, it says you must resubmit this within X. I think it's about 4 months, something like that. If you get it back and you're about to go on traveling or you're about to do something that you know you might have difficulty turning it round, then let the editor know. Say, "I'm sorry, can I have an extra whatever weeks?" And they will look at whether that's at all possible. But let's say things are going smoothly for you. You put it in, it has some corrections, you put it in, and then you resubmit it. And then it goes back to the same referees if possible. Now, again, the same thing applies to referees as applies to you. It may be that one of the referees who looked at it originally is not well, is traveling or whatever, and I have to send it to a different referee. So that can be a challenge when you get a different comment back. And perhaps we can talk about that in a minute. But hopefully, if everything goes smoothly, you resubmit it, the referees look at it, they say, "Yep, this is good, they've done what I asked," or "They've not done what I asked." Now, one of the things, as you get more confident, if a referee says, "I think you should use more X," you can write back in your feedback to the referee and said, "I considered using more X, but decided this wasn't that applicable to my piece of writing." You've got to have a balance between accepting what the referee says and saying, "Well, actually, I did consider using that or thinking about this, but actually I came up with this." It's difficult to do. As you get more experience, that's something you might want to think about. So there we are. So that's the sort of general overview process for email. Thank you. I don't think I'll go to the portal actually, Deb, now, if you don't mind, because it won't allow us the time for questions. It's very simple. That's the link, and it'll take you through it. Have a look at the portal and how to do it, because you'll find it quite useful. I think it's relatively simple. It's not a difficult thing to do. Thank you. Okay, some key journal information. I'm really just to show you some of the different ways of ranking that there are in the journal world. You have 2-year impact factors, 5-year impact factors, you've got indexes, ranks, etc., etc. And I'm not going to go through all of them because honestly, some of them I'm not sure about myself. But I do know, because I've been on the EMAL board quite a long time, is that EMAL took a long time to get into the best journal Q1 category and has stayed there consistently for quite a long time. And we aim to keep that up. And that's why actually we turn down more articles than we take, because we're looking for the best that we can possibly find for the journal to keep all these indexes high in terms of email. Okay, thanks, Deb. That was the system. I won't go there unless we have to. So that's the Manuscript Central. All journals use very similar parts. Most of them use Manuscript Central, but different home pages. Okay, so these are my 10 basic criteria for desk reject, because I think people like to know why you desk reject them. They're not in any way, there are other reasons you might desk reject. Some other editors might argue with me that they don't think this is very, but this is my 10 criteria, which I thought you might be helpful when you're formulating your article for email. First of all, it doesn't meet the journal guidelines. The journal guidelines are on the email website. They tell you what they are. Look at them before you go ahead with doing anything. Doesn't fit within the specific field. That's what I was just telling you about. It may be a really interesting article about neurodiversity in Kazakhstan, but no, not for email. And I try to write a pleasant note back to somebody, but make sure that you do fit it with the journal's scope. And this applies to other journals that you might want to put your article to. Suffers from significant academic writing deficiencies. And by that, I mean, I read it because I read all the articles before I decide what to do with them. Some of them you think this is someone's master's work and they haven't really thought about how it becomes an article. I don't know, but it also might have proofreading problems in it. I can't tell you how many articles I get that haven't been properly proofread. Do the proofreading, folks. Do the proofreading. You have to do it for your PhD, do it for your article. Doesn't have enough of the literature and the theoretical background to what you're trying to talk about, because unless you've got an absolutely out of the blue exciting idea, it will have background. Let's hear who's looked at this before. I was thinking Toby Greene, when he wrote one of his structural reform articles, cited something that my friend Tim Simpkins and I wrote. Look at what's going on in the background. Has limited implications for educational leadership, scholarship and practice. And by that, usually I mean it's contextual. So let's use Kentucky as an example again. Principal preparation programs in Kentucky. Interesting. Have they written enough about how they're relevant to the rest of the world? How is somebody reading it in Africa going to take something from this? Because we're an international journal. We have academics, we have practitioners, and if you're too specific, then it could be tricky. It doesn't mean you can't write about something very specific, but I think you have to pull out of it what the lessons for scholarship and practice are. Okay. Number 6 doesn't happen very often, but occasionally, I can recall one. There was really no data. There wasn't even an argument going on in the piece, so that was desk rejected. Minimal likelihood of acceptance by reviewers if sent out for review. I think this is a difficult one, but it's something I bear in mind because it's awful to be sent out to reviewers and get crushingly rejected at that point. It perhaps might be, we can argue about this, but that's what I feel, that people would prefer that. And the minimal likelihood of acceptance, it's because some of the things up above might apply to it, okay? Has unjustified level of similarity to other papers and resources. So if you're part of a big research project, you could probably write lots and lots of papers about that research that you've done. But you can't keep writing papers about the very same thing, trying to come in from a different angle. So just be careful. Have a look in the most recent editions of EMAL and see what's EMAL publishing at the moment. Is there a lot of writing about X or Y? Just have a look, because that's that's what I mean by similarity there. It's not plagiarism I'm not talking about. If it's really doesn't take us further, and when I say innovative ideas, I don't mean something totally new, but I like to think that some of the articles we take through do give us innovative ideas. And the last one goes back to what I said earlier. It doesn't explain the relevance of the work beyond the context given. As you can see, all these connect to each other, because it very much will be one of those things. Perhaps certainly number one will be an automatic desk reject, but some of the others are a little bit closer. But they're my kind of overall guidelines. I don't always get it right. I take one through to review and it goes out to the reviewers and they say, no, it should be rejected. And then they get quite crotchety with me for sending it out to them. So it's a difficult one. I can either offend the writer or I can offend the reviewers. And very occasionally I offend both parties. So that's the joy of being an editor. Right, next one.
And Megan sent me one out not that long ago, and I did feel that it was just somebody's master's thesis that hadn't even been properly turned into a paper. So I sent it back to her going, no, I don't think this is there yet. You know, that doesn't mean the work doesn't have merit of itself. It means that somebody hasn't done the work turning it into a paper, and it's still reading as if it meets the metrics that you were examined on for your master's or for your doctorate. So, and we can be a bit grumpy then, because we're all busy, aren't we? So we're all trying to do it around all these other roles that we do.
Yeah.
And
I can't remember that one particularly, but I probably, when I read it, thought maybe there's just a sliver of hope that this could be turned round, you see, because sometimes I feel generous, but it's difficult, isn't it, to know what to do, really. Yeah. So that's a sort of very quick overview. Deb, have I missed anything really important, do you think?
I don't think so. I think the critical thing is for people not to feel flat when they get rejected, right? We've all been rejected. I remember being rejected from EMAL and just being distraught because everybody I know has written for it and I haven't, and I review for it, but I haven't ever published in it. And so there is you do have to just kind of pick yourself up, dust yourself off and have another go. And you have to use the comments that are on it to help you, and to think about whether or not, all those things Megan said, whether or not it was the right journal, was the right emphasis, what feedback have they given you? And as Megan said at the beginning, you can get in touch and say, could I have a little bit more feedback? We can do that. It'd be hard work if everybody got in touch to say that, but ultimately everybody wants everyone to be successful, don't we? We're about supporting people through their academic careers, so trying to do as much as we can to support people. It is worth knowing that both Tony Bush and Paul Armstrong regularly do a session at BELMAS conference on what they think makes a good paper in their journals, and they always do a meet the editors session, and they're always usually pretty busy at those sessions. So it's definitely worth, just coming and having that chat or saying, Megan and I were at BERA conference the other week, and somebody came up to us, didn't they, with their supervisor, and the supervisor said, oh, we've got this randomized control trial that we want to write up. And Megan, you said?
I can't remember, Deb. What did
I think you said something along the lines of, no, thanks. I don't think we're the best journal for it because we've published quite a few recently, and that a better journal might be blah, blah, and pointed in another direction.
Yeah, I think I should have said that actually. If the article, if I can be helpful with the article when I reject it, either at the first desk reject or at the last stage, I say this article, have you thought about trying these journals? And I often suggest people 2 or 3 other journals that they might, use the referee's comments and try somewhere else. That's perfectly fine, I think, really. I don't know if we need the PowerPoint actually for a minute.
No, we probably don't actually. Shall we stop there and I'll do a stop share? Yeah. And then we can have more of a discussion. Do we want to stop the record? Can we pause the recording, Cynthia? And then we'll come. We've been through a range of questions with Megan as Deputy Editor of EMAL, and we've asked questions, but also what we wanted to draw to your attention is that we're happy to answer questions at BELMAS, and if you email the info@belmas.org.uk email address, the team will make sure that the questions get passed on to the right person on the team. And then we just wanted to remind you that the deadline for the conference abstract submission is midnight on Sunday, the 17th of November. And be aware of your relevant time zone. You know, every year somebody misses out because they end up posting it just too late. So just really be aware of the fact that it's midnight, so GMT.
And I just wanted to say, to be positive, I didn't realise till I became an editor at EMAL how many of the big names in our field, and I won't name names, got major corrections occasionally. So it happens to everybody. That's what I would say.
I think I think that's really useful for people to know, because they'll assume that names in field submit perfect papers that just go straight through. And of course, everybody's human, right? So it's the world is not like that.
No, no, exactly.
Yeah. So that's all the things that we had to say, apart from the fact that we're having an extra session for submitting a conference abstract on Thursday, the 7th of November. So if you want to come to that, that's at 2 o'clock in the afternoon as well. But very nice to see the people who are live on screen today, and we hope that this has been useful if you're watching it as a recording. Thanks very much.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.